In the cold, silent expanse beyond our solar system, something impossible is bleeding into our reality. It's not a signal, not a spacecraft, not even a message in the way we understand one. It's something stranger and quieter. A visitor from the stars, known as 3I Atlas, is shedding pure nickel, 10 pounds per second, as it races through our system. But not just any nickel. This is refined, industrial grade, and nearly free of iron. Something that should not, by any natural process, exist in the cosmos. And now, the James Webb Space Telescope has just confirmed what some scientists feared all along. This isn't a comet. It's not even an asteroid. It may very well be a fragment of technology, a relic, or something far more deliberate. This isn't a discovery. It's a challenge, quietly hurled at the feet of humanity. Because if what we're seeing is real, then everything we thought we knew about cosmic objects just collapsed. It all began on July 1st, 2025, when a telescope array in Chile picked up a fast-moving object slicing across the sky. At first glance, it was just another icy interloper, a comet from the great beyond. But this was only the third confirmed interstellar object in human history, and its velocity, 130,000 miles per hour, meant it came from outside the solar system. That alone was extraordinary. But what came next shattered every expectation. When astronomers turned their most powerful instruments toward its coma, the glowing halo of gas and dust surrounding its nucleus, they expected to find the usual suspects: water vapor, carbon compounds, silicates, and trace metals. Instead, they found something that made no sense. 3I Atlas was releasing pure nickel into space. Not just traces, 10 pounds every second. And where there was nickel, there was no iron. That was the first red flag, because in space, nickel and iron are forged together in the same stellar crucibles. They're cosmic twins. To find one without the other is like discovering salt without sodium. It doesn't happen, unless someone or something made it happen. The news spread quickly, but not everyone dismissed it as just an oddity. At Harvard, one astrophysicist saw in this metallic shedding something eerily familiar. Not natural, but industrial. On Earth, separating nickel from iron takes energy, technology, infrastructure. You don't find refined nickel scattered around the desert, and you certainly don't expect to see it ejected into space from a comet. This was a process, not a product of chance. He warned, nature doesn't do this. Industry does. Suddenly, the question shifted from what 3I Atlas is to who made it. The James Webb Space Telescope was called in. Its instruments peeled away layers of mystery, revealing not water ice, but a cloud rich in carbon dioxide, the highest CO2 to water ratio ever recorded in a space object, 8-to-1. Our comets average just 4%. This was chemically alien. And the metals? They weren't raw ore. They were refined, specific, and constant. Not a natural leak, but a chemical signature. And in that signal, perhaps a code. But chemical anomalies were only the beginning. As astronomers tracked 3I Atlas's trajectory, the unease deepened. It wasn't just passing through the solar system randomly, it was navigating it. One by one, it made astonishingly precise flybys of Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, a statistical impossibility for any natural object. The odds of this path occurring by chance? 0.005%, a cosmic miracle, or an engineered route. Even more suspicious, its closest approach to the Sun, its perihelion, happened behind the Sun, perfectly timed to obscure it from Earth's instruments during its most active phase. Coincidence or design? Some now believe this wasn't just a visitor, it was a surveyor. Moving retrograde, against the flow of our planets, tilted at just 5 degrees, as if it had been programmed to move through our system the way a satellite might scan a city block. A slow, deliberate tour of the inner solar system, collecting data, or perhaps transmitting it. The James Webb Space Telescope, with its unmatched infrared eyes, delivered the final blow to conventional theory. Its instruments broke down the spectral fingerprint of 3I Atlas, and the results were stunning. Not only did it confirm the unusual absence of iron, but it also revealed traces of metallic alloys not known to form naturally. Alloys with properties that suggest purpose, not accident. Combinations that, on Earth, would be used in high-stress environments, Spacecraft hulls, energy converters, deep space sensors. And yet here they were, freely drifting from an object we thought was just a rock. The alloy ratios, when plotted, showed regularity, almost as if they were being released in sequences, patterns. And that's when some theorists proposed a chilling possibility. What if the elemental composition isn't just strange? What if it's language? A message, not spoken or written, but coded in atoms. The signature of a civilization so advanced it doesn't use sound or light, but chemistry to speak. Scientists initially assumed the release of nickel and gas from 3I Atlas was the result of conventional cometary outgassing, heat from the sun triggering volatile compounds to burst from the nucleus. But deeper analysis revealed something strange. The release was too smooth, too uniform, too controlled. Unlike typical comet outbursts, which spike and fade chaotically, this emission maintained a consistent rate. Not only that, the direction of the gas flow was off-axis, not aligned with where sunlight should have caused sublimation. In fact, the ejection appeared directional. That's when researchers began to rethink everything. What if this wasn't outgassing at all? What if it was propulsion? Not in the sense of rocket engines, but something subtler, like microthrusting via material ejection, a known theoretical method for deep space maneuvering. The kind of system an ancient probe might use to correct its path using only internal resources, disguising its course changes as natural emissions. A kind of camouflage through physics, hiding intention beneath what appears to be chemistry. To many in the scientific community, 3I Atlas is beginning to look like a more aggressive version of Oumuamua, another interstellar visitor that defied explanation when it tumbled through our solar system in 2017. But where Oumuamua was small, quiet, and elusive, Atlas is bolder, brighter, and far more massive. Both objects exhibit non-gravitational acceleration, both show chemical anomalies, and both took trajectories that feel deliberate. But there's a key difference. Atlas is shedding highly specific materials. It's as if, between then and now, the stakes have escalated. Some theorists now suggest Oumuamua was a scout, an initial test, and 3I Atlas? The next phase. A device not just passing through but interacting with our star system, performing maneuvers, releasing signals, or possibly even testing responses. And we, caught in its wake, are only just beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, this isn't random at all. Maybe it's a sequence, a series of encounters. And 3I Atlas is just the second note in a much larger symphony we were never meant to hear all at once. Amid the growing intrigue, another disturbing reality has emerged. Some of the data now surfacing about 3I Atlas was gathered months ago and sat unprocessed. Deep sky surveys, private observatories, even defense-oriented skywatching systems picked up metallic signatures, trajectory inconsistencies, and emission anomalies, but either failed to flag them or never shared the findings publicly. It wasn't until citizen scientists and independent researchers began correlating notes that the full picture emerged. And when it did, a chilling question followed. Why didn't the agencies warn us sooner? Some believe they were overwhelmed. Others think the anomaly was too subtle to classify. But a growing number suspect something more strategic, that someone recognized how unexplainable this truly was and chose instead to delay, to observe not just the object, but our reaction to it. Because in a world where information travels faster than light, the real data might not be coming from 3I Atlas at all. It might be coming from us. As the debate rages on, a philosophical shift is starting to take hold. Maybe 3I Atlas isn't here to say something. Maybe it is the message. A vessel built not for speed, not for return, but for durability across millennia. A probe that was never meant to survive entry, but to leave behind a chemical fingerprint so unmistakable it couldn't be ignored. A trail of metals and gas calibrated to puzzle any civilization smart enough to detect it. In this view, 3I Atlas becomes more than a visitor. It becomes a signal in material form, one that doesn't use language, light, or code, but elemental complexity. Its materials, nickel-rich, iron-free, alloyed, and distributed deliberately, may not be debris. They may be breadcrumbs, each one placed to provoke thought, not contact. And if that's true, then the object itself may be less important than what it causes us to ask. Because the real signal may not be the one we're receiving, but the one we're now sending back out, simply by acknowledging its existence. When orbital analysts plotted the trajectory of 3I Atlas in three-dimensional space, an unsettling pattern began to emerge. Its path wasn't just mathematically unlikely, it aligned with gravitational assists from multiple planets in a way that seemed orchestrated. First Venus, then Mars, then a near-perfect slingshot past Jupiter. Each flyby adjusted its velocity just enough to shift its course precisely, like a probe using the solar system as a navigation grid. But more disturbing was its inclination, just 5 degrees off the ecliptic, retrograde, but not erratic. This wasn't a wild interstellar fragment bouncing through gravity wells. It was following a plan, one invisible to us, until now. It's as if 3I Atlas had been pre-programmed to pass near each planet without disrupting orbits, without drawing attention, but just close enough to collect data or observe. In the vastness of space, coincidence fades quickly. And when paths align like this, there's only one word that remains: design. When the James Webb Telescope aimed its infrared eye at 3I Atlas, it wasn't just looking for chemical composition, it was listening, in its own way, for order. And what it found has quietly shaken the confidence of many in the scientific community. The metallic readings didn't just confirm the presence of engineered alloys. They revealed a repeating distribution pattern, like pulses. Bursts of material emission timed in regular intervals, correlating almost precisely with the object's distance from solar bodies. These weren't chaotic eruptions. They were regulated, like a beacon broadcasting without sound. Every time Atlas passed near a planet or entered a new zone of gravitational influence, it released a new cluster of exotic material, each with a slightly altered chemical signature. Webb's spectrographs recorded it in high precision, and when the data was laid out across time, a pattern emerged. Not random, not geologic, not even biological, systematic, like an update, or worse, a report being sent back home. Buried in the Webb data was one more detail, initially overlooked. Among the alloys being released from 3I Atlas was a rare combination of elements: vanadium, tungsten, and a trace of technetium. On Earth, these are used in nuclear reactors, deep space shielding, and advanced material science. But technetium is the most alarming. It has no stable isotopes. It does not occur naturally in any meaningful amount. It's a product of refinement, of reactors and supernovae. To find it drifting through space in a pure, isolated form suggests one of two things. Either this object passed through a dying star and survived intact, a probability bordering on zero, or it was constructed with purposeful inclusion of a material that signals sophistication beyond natural astrophysical processes. In short, the metal itself is a statement, a whisper from across the void that says, "We know what fusion is. Do you?" And then, a darker theory began to surface among physicists and astronomers brave enough to speculate freely. What if 3I Atlas isn't a probe in the traditional sense? Not a scout, not a messenger, not even an emissary. What if it's a test? A tool not meant to inform us, but to measure us. Not to communicate, but to observe how we react, how quickly we detect anomalies, how deeply we analyze impossible materials, how well our brightest minds collaborate under pressure, and, perhaps most crucially, how our civilizations handle ambiguity. Because a species that can't recognize the abnormal will never escape its gravity well. And one that sees the anomaly but explains it away out of fear may not be ready to join anything greater. Seen through this lens, 3I Atlas becomes something far more terrifying than a visitor. It becomes a filter, a quiet, drifting evaluation mechanism designed to pass silently through emerging intelligent systems and see which ones dare to ask the right questions. When researchers took a closer look at the atomic spectra of the alloys released by 3I Atlas, they discovered something profoundly disturbing. The metals weren't just rare, their atomic resonance frequencies aligned to a pattern, not random, not natural. When plotted, the emission lines formed a mathematical sequence, not unlike a musical scale. Think about that. Metals releasing in a cadence that forms harmonic intervals. This is no longer about chemistry, it's about structure. A structure that resonates with the physics of the universe, possibly as a form of identification or encryption. One physicist suggested that if you translated those frequencies into sound, they would resemble a chord progression, not music in the human sense, but a signature embedded in matter, which means 3I Atlas may not be just a probe or a test. It may be a message in the language of the cosmos itself, a message we're only beginning to hear, buried not in radio signals, but in the vibrations of the periodic table. And yet something about all this feels too intentional. The metals, the patterns, the trajectory, all whisper of design. And yet, there's no transmission, no ping, no artificial signal in radio, infrared, X-ray, or microwave. It's as if 3I Atlas has been designed to be seen but not heard. And that silence is not ignorance, it's discipline. In fact, this may be the greatest evidence of intelligence we've seen so far. Because any advanced civilization would know that broadcasting into the void is a liability. It would not shout. It would not blink. It would move like a ghost through the galaxy, invisible except to those advanced enough to see the clues. That's exactly what 3I Atlas is doing. It's not announcing itself. It's revealing itself, slowly, through the precision of its silence. And that realization forces us to ask, if this is how they move, how many have passed by already, unnoticed? But then something even more chilling arises. If 3I Atlas is truly observing us, quietly measuring how we react, what questions we ask, how our systems respond, then the object is no longer the source of the signal. We are. Every spectrograph pointed toward it, every news article published, every scientific debate and every piece of data uploaded into public databases becomes part of our reply. And if someone, or something, is listening from afar, this could be what they're waiting for. Not a message in binary code, not a giant radio telescope transmission, but a cascade of behavior. Collective, decentralized, organic. Our reaction is the response. It's the cosmic equivalent of blushing, a spontaneous display of awareness that reveals more than words ever could. In that light, maybe 3I Atlas doesn't have a message. Maybe we are the experiment, and the results are already being logged. Now we come to the most uncomfortable possibility of all, that 3I Atlas is part of something vastly older than we imagined. A long-running project, unfolding not over decades or centuries, but across millions of years. A system of probes seeded into the galaxy at slow intervals, designed to awaken interest in rising civilizations just as they gain the tools to detect anomalies. It doesn't need to travel fast. It doesn't need to communicate directly. It only needs to be noticed at the exact moment a civilization becomes capable of asking the right questions. If this theory is true, then 3I Atlas is not here by accident. It arrived exactly when it needed to, and it leaves us with the realization that maybe intelligence in its highest form doesn't dominate or conquer. It waits, it watches, it measures, and in the silence between the stars, it evolves. Across all known data about 3I Atlas, one detail has begun to haunt astrophysicists more than any metallic anomaly or improbable orbit: the sheer elegance of its timing. Not only did it appear when Earth had just enough instruments to detect its nature, but its chemical emissions began during specific orbital phases, when sunlight, planetary alignments, and even Earth-based visibility were optimal. As if it was timed to perfection, not to be spectacular, but to be just detectable. That's not an accident. That's strategy. And it suggests something far more sophisticated than alien life as we've imagined it. It points to a civilization whose technology is built around patience, one that plants seeds not for results tomorrow, but for outcomes in geological timeframes. In that context, 3I Atlas becomes less like a comet, and more like an instrument in a galactic architecture of monitoring, passing silently through systems, checking variables, logging outcomes, and then moving on. It doesn't demand attention. It rewards only those who look deeply enough to notice the orchestration behind the randomness. In the wake of 3I Atlas, something subtle has begun to shift, not in space, but in us. Scientists are no longer just analyzing its metals and orbits. They're questioning the very frameworks we use to define what is natural or artificial. Philosophers, theologians, mathematicians, and engineers are all finding themselves tangled in the same question. If intelligence can be invisible, silent, and timeless, how do we ever prove it existed at all? And in that question lies the final twist. Perhaps 3i Atlas was never meant to prove anything. Perhaps it was sent not to change the universe, but to change us. Because now we look at the sky differently. Now we second-guess the dust. We peer deeper into the patterns. We distrust the silence. In doing so, we evolve, not technologically, but intellectually. And maybe, just maybe, that was the mission all along. Not contact, not invasion, but ignition. In a sky we've studied for centuries, 3i Atlas appeared not as a firework, not as a threat, but as a question, so precise, so elegantly silent, that it split our understanding of space in two. This wasn't a discovery. It was a confrontation, not with aliens, not with danger, but with the one thing we've always feared the most, not being alone and not being ready. Because if what we've seen is real, if this object is ejecting refined metals that don't belong to any known natural process, if its trajectory is too precise, its emissions too rhythmic, its silence too strategic, then we're not observing a rock. We're observing intelligence in motion, intelligence that doesn't ask to be seen, but waits to be noticed. And now that we've noticed it, what changes? Maybe it doesn't matter whether 3i Atlas is a probe, a relic, or a ghost. Maybe what matters is that it has already done what it came to do. It forced us to look closer, to work together, to question the natural, the artificial, the possible. And in doing so, it left behind something more valuable than data. It left behind a mirror. Because what if the real message wasn't in the metals, or the trajectory, or the silence? What if the real message was how we responded?